The Mazda CX-9 is not the most practical in the class, nor is it the most cutting edge or the most efficient. However, its strong points are so convincing that I think I can forget about those shortcomings. If you enjoy detailed, fun car content and reviews without the fluff, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. So for 2022, there's not a whole lot new. The most notable being standard all-wheel drive, just like the rest of the Mazda lineup. And the addition of a new trim. The trim layout for the CX-9 is somewhat simple. You have the Sport, Touring, Touring Plus, which is new for 2022 and offers more bang for the buck than the Louisiana Purchase. And then you have the Carbon Edition, which is based off of that Touring Plus, but adds this polymetal gray color, black mirror caps there, and a red interior. Above that, you're going to have the Grand Touring and the Signature. Although you really do get a healthy amount of standard features like LED headlights with LED daytime running lights. LED fog lights also come on the Touring trim. Carbon Edition buyers though will have a steering responsive headlight up front. Signature buyers get accent lighting for the grille though, if you really want to stand out. I'm not the type to really dive into the looks of a car. However, once again, I think especially with the Carbon Edition, Mazda nails the color combo here, and all their designs are bold without doing too much. So I think this is the best looking crossover in the segment, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. Under the hood, you're gonna have the same 2.5 liter turbocharged direct injected engine as from years past in this generation. Nothing has really changed. And it is an awesome motor. It's paired up to a 6-speed automatic that with this engine works quite well, mainly because it has a lot of torque down low. So the transmission doesn't need to keep the engine in a higher rev range if you're trying to ask more power from it. This engine also makes its peak horsepower on premium fuel. That's 250 horsepower, 320 pound-feet of torque, but it's perfectly happy on regular fuel, and that's what we have it on today. 227 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque. If you're wondering about turbo lag, this engine has some trickery to try to alleviate that. This uses a separate vane and valve to feed exhaust gas into the turbo at low RPMs, which helps the turbine spool up faster to reduce lag. To basically allow the turbo to have good response, more so like a naturally aspirated car, and it works really well in the real world. It's probably my favorite it is my favorite turbocharged engine in a mainstream vehicle like this. And the all-wheel drive system is also nothing to scoff at. It comes standard with a trail mode, which allows the system to use the brakes to get torque transfer from side to side. Works pretty well from what I've seen with the Mazda CX-5. Plus the ground clearance is a Subaru besting 8.8 inches. Although I would think hard about taking this thing overlanding because the approach departure angles are not great. So the engine here provides great response and the transmission does as well. But when it comes to outright performance, let's see what it can do to 60. I guess you got no traction control off button in here. It's kind of common for Mazdas at this point. It's got great off-the-line performance, but it's not something where it's like continuing to beat you up. It feels like a torquey mid-size crossover, but a mid-size crossover nonetheless. And I got a 0 to 60 time about 7.7 seconds. On regular fuel, again, you can put in premium, pump those numbers up a little bit, but I don't see anybody doing that right now, especially when premium's like $6 plus a gallon. And while it doesn't stand out or offer a hybrid, the CX-9 has competitive fuel economy ratings. But again, the kicker here is really not the overall performance, it's that low down torque that this thing really excels at. It doesn't feel like the engine has to work that hard to give you the performance that you want. And the 6-speed auto shifts quite slowly, even under hard acceleration. The benefit is silky smooth shifts. It's unfortunate that this powertrain can only tow 3,500 pounds. And I need to thank Royal South Mazda in Bloomington, Indiana for letting me try out this CX-9 for today's review. Royal Mazda is a small, honest dealership with a nice facility and an easy process. If you're in the market, check them out. Standard, the CX-9 is going to come with 18-inch wheels, but if you step up to the Touring Plus, you'll have gloss black 20s. The Signature model will get more of an alloy look. A couple notable features. For the Touring models, you'll have a proximity key unlock and lock, except it doesn't have the sensor behind the door handle. It actually comes in the form of a button. Touring buyers also get a power rear tailgate, and Touring Plus models will get roof rails. And all CX-9s have real exhaust tips. Now, pulling up to highway speeds is an easy task. The turbocharged engine never feels too stressed out. At 65 miles per hour, RPMs are a hair above 2,000. The CX-9 does have a little bit of wind noise coming through, and road noise is pretty tame too. I would still label it as a quiet car, but more so the quiet that you would expect if you're spending $45,000, $50,000 on an SUV. The interior of the CX-9 is both distinct and high quality, leading to something that I think will stand the test of time. And it already has, considering this is now in its 7th model year. So Mazda has introduced some upgrades to their other interiors that haven't shown up here yet, like better screen integration on the dash and improved materials. While its soft touch materials aren't as excessive as what's in the CX-30, your elbow rests are very plush. You even have knee padding, but only on the center console here. And if you're taller like me, I'm 6'3", you will kind of just rest your knee on the shiny plastic. Same issue on the other side. The seats in here are probably Mazda's most agreeable set. There's not very much bolstering. There's no weird stitching. It doesn't feel like it's pinching my shoulders. I do wish I had a little bit more thigh support, but at least you get lumbar adjustment on all trims. But I think that I could be comfortable in here for an extended period of time. The thing that more so limits comfort is the cabin's wider center console here, and the protrusion of the door panel kind of makes it feel narrow and forces my knees to, again, rest on the plastic parts here. Especially if you're someone that's wider or taller than me, this could be a nuisance for you. The design is interesting too. I really love how they shape the vents into the door panel and how the dashboard has like a kind of steep grade up into the hood. It's just a different experience than what I'm used to with pretty much any other vehicle in the class. And everything that you grab and touch feels solid, despite it not having perfect fit and finish, and the materials not being exactly Audi rivaling. Although if you go with the Grand Touring, you'll get true aluminum accents here in the interior. And if you go with the Signature, you'll get Napa leather and actual wood. So if you want something that is truly a near luxury, or honestly luxury experience, the CX-9 can provide that. But one thing it won't is the most fresh and modern tech. You have an available 7-inch gauge cluster screen here that takes the place of the speedometer, and it works pretty well, but it's limited with its configurability. If you go with the lower trim models, you'll have a full analog setup with a smaller multifunction display. If you want to step up the tech, Grand Touring buyers get a 360 view camera and a heads-up display. But that's not the focus of the Mazda, and you get reminded of that again with the 10-inch infotainment screen here that is controlled through a dial. It's a oversimplified setup. It can make some things, like even just tuning the radio, a little bit more convoluted than it needs to be. However, Mazda really places a focus on driving. In motion, this system makes a lot more sense. My hand just rests down here next to the control dial, and it has a nice little click to it. And you have all physical buttons in here. So if you're one of the 16 people that prefer capacitive controls, who all happen to be car interior designers, you will be out of luck here. This screen and wired Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are standard on all CX-9s. And you do have a wireless charger in here, but it's something that you'll get with the Touring Premium package, which kind of bridges the gap between Plus and regular. And honestly, this does have a fair amount of features here for the money. You have heated ventilated seats so long as you step up to the Touring Plus. Tri-zone automatic climate control comes standard on all CX-9s, as does heated seats. You get leather seating so long as you don't get the base. But one thing I find interesting, and I believe this is carbon exclusive, you have chrome controls, and other carbon bits include just red stitching throughout and black metallic looking trim. But it's not just aesthetics. You get a heated steering wheel in the carbon along with paddle shifters. So you have a 12-speaker Bose audio system in here, and it works great. Plenty of bass. It could be a bit more crisp. I feel like maybe it's just down to speaker placement. I feel like the overall quality of the sound system in the Mazda CX-30 is just a little bit better. But either way, I don't see anybody being disappointed with this. And that system's going to come on the Touring with the premium package. Lower trims will just have 6 speakers. And the screen here, while nice, does look like it was just shoved into the dashboard. Like this is Modern Warfare 2 and Mazda was just trying to plant a claymore And also I appreciate the overall analog feel of everything in here. Clicking the buttons and rotating the dials is a nice experience for me. Yes, the cabin has impressed a childless 22-year-old car reviewer whose closest thing to a kid is an 8-pound barking mop, owned by his girlfriend. Where the CX-9 stumbles some for families is storage and cargo capacities. It's adequate for a regular SUV, but not a 3-row people hauler. You have a split center console here, which is kind of fun to play with. None of the cup holders in here will fit my 40-ounce Hydro Flask. With the front seat set in a comfortable yet not excessive position, I have enough space back here, just barely, for my knees. I do feel like I'm sitting pretty high up in the car, yet I still have more than enough headroom, probably thanks to the fact that this doesn't have a panoramic sunroof. But I do have controls back here for the climate, along with heated seats, which comes on Carbon Edition and up. Now, one thing that comes on the Carbon Edition and Signature is captain seating. But elsewhere, most CX-9s will offer this 6-seat variant. The Signature gets an exclusive rear center console, but if you don't need that luxury and like your Mazda to be a little shady, second row sunshades come on the Touring Premium and up. And these doors open plenty wide if you're trying to fit in a child seat. I think if I'm going a long distance, I would be more than happy to sit in the back of a Mazda CX-9. It's not like it's the most spacious in the segment, but the seats are comfortable and I like the amenities and the soft elbow rests and my view outside of the cabin. And now I'll hop into the third row. Oh! Ah! The third row of the CX-9 is not as bad as I was thinking. I actually can fit my foot underneath the seat, although I would say anybody probably past, 5'6", 5'7", probably not gonna wanna be back here for too extended of a period of time. It is class competitive, and honestly, I think better than the Toyota Highlander. At least these seats are cushy and aren't just placed directly on the ground. Plus you have nice little storage and your own USB ports, which come with the Touring Premium package. Unfortunately, if you're riding back here, the only climate vents you will have are underneath the second row. The CX-9's third row can work for adults if the need arises, just as well as half of its competitors. Where the Mazda loses some ground is in the... Well, the cargo area of the Mazda CX-9 is definitely lacking compared to a lot of its larger competitors. It's reasonable, and I was expecting it to be worse than it is. But where I really see this thing starting to fall short is behind the second row seats. If you're comparing it to something like a Pilot or Telluride, it is substantially smaller. You can still fold your back seats, and they do fold quite flat, but the height here is definitely limited, and the width ain't exactly something to brag about. Personally, I think the sizing of this, both with the passenger and the cargo area, will work for a lot of families. But for those who demand the absolute most from their crossovers, this just ain't it. But I urge you to drive one before coming to that conclusion. On an uneven, rough road surface, the Mazda CX-9 excels. Even though it is a more firm ride, it still remains taut and composed without abusing its occupants. Road imperfections gently make their way into the cabin as the Mazda maintains a solid sense of control. So despite its... brakes are pretty good too. So despite its more sporty nature, you're not really paying the price for that. If you're looking for the most forgiving ride, you're probably going to want to go with something like a Subaru Ascent or Toyota Highlander, but I don't think you'll be kicking yourself for picking up a CX-9 if smoothness is what you're after. The steering is, and this is with pretty much every Mazda, the steering is very predictable. You know exactly where the car is going. It does give a little bit of feedback there. You kind of have the gist of what's going on with the front end of your Mazda CX-9. And it's also not darty, it's an easy car to drive, and I think with Mazda going more premium than sporty the past 5 years, I think that the CX-9 fits that description perfectly. I can take it through these corners and it feels composed and controlled. And that's really what people buying a car like this are gonna care about. And it isolates you a little while you're doing that, so it feels ultra refined. And while yeah, the thing does show it's 2 ton and some change curb weight, body roll in motion here at a little bit higher speeds on corners is still relatively well kept. Visibility of the CX-9 is middle of the road. I can see out of the front just fine. I get just barely a glimpse of the hood there. I would say that its higher belt line here does impede on visibility just a tad, but at no point do I really feel like I'm having difficulty seeing out of the CX-9. And the nice thing is you have standard blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert on every Mazda CX-9, along with adaptive cruise and a lane departure prevention system. And a lane keep assist comes on all models too. I just found that the car was inconsistent with locating lanes in general. Nope, nothing. That's not good. Nothing. If I did that in a Subaru, it would have already called my mom and gave me detention. But it tends to work better in the highway, and autonomous braking is also still standard here, so at least you have the safety functions in place. The tech is at least standard, but other brands' autonomous systems are ahead of Mazda's. But it's definitely a trade-off I'm willing to make, because one, I like driving, and the Mazda CX-9 is one of the only large crossovers in the market that rewards you for driving. It's a pleasure because that steering, again, is so predictable. It makes you feel more connected to the road. The engine and transmission are very responsive. The ride quality is great. It feels like it's in control. And that leads to the overarching impression that the CX-9 has substance. It's solid, and the reliability over the last 7 model years reflects that. The only somewhat consistent issues were minor tech failures, and there were a couple reports of the active safety features acting up, but the CX-9, which is built in Japan and does not have cylinder deactivation, appears to be holding up well. I would just take some precautions to prevent carbon buildup since this is direct injection only, but I'm not reading any issues on that here either. My review appears to be glowing, and that's because the CX-9 is an awesome SUV, one that even appeals to someone without kids or 3-row needs. So why, in its best year ever in 2021, did the CX-9 get its sales quadrupled by the Honda Pilot? My opinion, because it's not sized to replace a minivan or a small bus. This lacks width and cargo space, and the brand name still isn't associated with bigger SUVs. However, it has enough space for the needs of many families, and despite Mazda usually offering the more expensive cars in their respective segments, the CX-9 is a bargain and full of features. The front seat could use more wiggle room. The interior has become a bit dated, and I think broad appeal would double if this had noticeably more cargo space than a Subaru Outback. Chances are, Mazda will address some or all of these concerns with the new CX-90. If they hit those points and retain the strong suits of this, the CX-90 will be a no-brainer. I just hope that they don't sacrifice some of the CX-9's character and poise in the process. If you're looking for a 3-row SUV and cargo space or towing capacity aren't your top priorities, the CX-9 is a stellar option. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like as it helps me in my ongoing battle with the YouTube algorithm. If you want to see more, subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. I'll catch you in the next one.